Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. It's me, Chris and Pat here to answer your burning questions. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn notifications on, because the first question was sent in by Basher Bo, who says, worst potential summer transfers, question mark? Now, Gareth Bale's name has been thrown into the mix by literally everybody. What are your thoughts on that one, Hamster?
Feels a little bit harsh, doesn't it? And I think he's getting a particularly bad send-off, of course. Real Madrid losing at the end of the season at home. Zinedine Zidane reportedly saying that he wouldn't have brought him on even if he had a fourth substitute. This led to the Welshman storming down the tunnel. Not quite storming, but he didn't go over to the fans like the rest of the players. He walked off down the tunnel sort of on his own, didn't he? Which is a good representation of his current standing at Real Madrid. He seems very isolated from the rest of the squad. And Zidane has subsequently said we should sell him at any cost. Now, this is a guy who's contributed, to a goal every other game for Real Madrid. He scored 2 winning goals in Champions League finals. I don't think they'd won the Champions League prior to his arrival in 12 years, and he's now won, 4? So this is someone that, it's odd, isn't it? He should be regarded as a club legend. He's one of kind of Britain's best exports, certainly when it comes to trophy horse. I think it's 13 at Real Madrid now. The first half of his stint, extremely prolific in terms of goals and assists. Yes, he's had injuries, I think 12 different injuries at his time at Real Madrid, and that has prevented him playing, 30 league games, certainly in the last couple of seasons. But it seems very personal with him and Zidane, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And Perez kind of wanted him to work out because, of course, he spent £85 million on him, a world record at the time, and he's now he's becoming kind of a blemish on Perez's legacy, isn't it? And he's tried his utmost, this sort of chairman, to make it work, but bringing in Zinedine Zidane or bringing him back in is probably the death knell of Gareth Bale. Now, reportedly, Real Madrid are willing to pay part of his wages, and just how much might define or decide, certainly for me, whether or not it'd be a good move to go in for it. Now, Tottenham Hotspur have been mooted, and if you can get away, if you're Tottenham with paying 100, 120k, taking him on loan for a year, having Real Madrid foot the rest of that 300k a week wage bill, then I think most certainly go in for him. I just want to see Gareth Bale enjoying his football again. This is a guy, 2014, he's scoring one of the goals of sort of the decade against Barcelona in that Copa del Rey final. Probably the best finish in a Champions League final we've ever seen. I just, as a neutral, just want to see him enjoying his football again, because on his day he's probably, still one of the top 20 footballers in the world. He's still a super elite talent. But going back to the question, I think it depends how much money you're going to pay for him, because injuries are taking their toll, and if it prevents Tottenham bringing in, youth, let's say, or revamping that squad in a couple of vital areas like we discussed before at the base of midfield, then maybe not so much worth it. But a loan move, paying a reasonable amount of wages, yeah, I'd go for it.
I don't know though. You look at Tottenham's wage bill, and they spend like 160 mil a season at the moment, and Bale gets paid about 25 mil in salary and bonuses at Real Madrid. So even if they pay half of that, they're still going to have to pay a loan fee as well. Then you're still looking at, maybe an 8% increase on like your annual wage bill just on Gareth Bale. And I'm not sure he really improves you. Like this season, there were certain people who made the argument last year for some reason that Real Madrid would be better once Ronaldo went, which I think was a fantastically stupid argument at the time and only looks worse now. Because he's had one of his worst seasons. I think 11 goals and assists in La Liga. 4 years ago, he was contributing a goal every 60 minutes. Last year, it was a goal every 100 minutes. This year, it's a goal every 160 minutes. And he turns 30 this year, and he's always been fairly reliant on pace. And it's hard to see why he'd be so much better at Spurs than he'd be at, say, Real Madrid, especially seeing as I think Pochettino's going to ask him to do more defensive work if he's going to play wide, unless he's just a backup centre forward, in which case it's a lot of money to spend for someone just to back up Kane. So I don't know. I look at Spurs and I think if I'm going to spend money this summer, this is the thing. Sometimes a player is perfectly fine, but you should just spend the money elsewhere. And actually, this is what I think with Griezmann as well. Okay, so Griezmann linked to Barcelona for, what is it, 100?
125 million euros, I think, yeah.
Right. See, this to me is an example of Barcelona not spending money wisely. It looked like they were going to go and get Jovic, which I think would have been really sensible, because Suarez is in decline, but Suarez is still incredibly good. Like, Suarez was second in the league for expected goals this season, scored 21, I think, in the end, while Griezmann scored 15. And I don't know, like, what you wanted was a young forward who would come in, would accept being a backup to Suarez for a couple of years, and then would be ready to take over from him as your first choice centre forward in 2 years' time.
Well, I think they thought that was going to be Jovic, but Real Madrid appeared to have usurped him, right?
But they were in the driving seat for Jovic back in the spring, and they could probably have got him over the line. We all thought that was going to happen. So then you'd have somebody who could sit on the bench for a couple of years or play La Liga games so that you can rest Suarez for Champions League, for example, and then would take the number 9 shirt once they're, say, 23 in Jovic's case. Instead, they've got a guy who's 28, whose 2 best positions are currently covered in the Barcelona squad by Messi and Suarez. He's never played off the left. It's not a thing that he's done. And actually, the players that they do have who cover the left are both linked with moves away in Coutinho and Ousmane Dembele. So it just seems to me like this is kind of weird squad building. Like, do I think that Griezmann is excellent? Yes. Do I think he'd get good numbers at Barcelona? Yes. Do I think this is the best way for Barcelona to spend their money? Absolutely not, because they need a long-term left-back heir to Jordi Alba.
So are you putting Griezmann in your potential worst summer signings?
I just think it's not joined up thinking, and that's the issue. Like, there's this idea that you should always just buy a good player if they're available. That's not true. Resources are always limited.
Yeah.
They're always limited. And you need to work out where you're going to spend money. And in this case, Barcelona need to spend money in other areas.
Just to revisit a former point, you don't think that Gareth Bale improves Tottenham Hotspurs?
I do think he
improves
improves
their squad.
But I think my worry would be I think any deal for Gareth Bale is probably going to either kickstart negotiations for Christian Eriksen or be part of negotiations for Christian Eriksen. It feels like Christian Eriksen is probably going to be
and I'd rather have Eriksen than Bale.
And I would also say if I was going to be involved in negotiations for a Real Madrid player, I'd potentially rather take an Isco or a James as part of those negotiations.
I was going to say,
or a fullback.
Yeah, maybe even
or Danny
Reguilon,
like if they got a fullback, say they got a fullback and Danny Ceballos or something like that. Like, there are things that they could do. Like, do I think he improves them if you just drop him in their squad? Sure, but that's not what will happen. Like, what would improve them more, in my mind, is a new right back and at least one central midfielder.
But this is kind of the point that I'm moving towards. If you've got 2 assets that Real Madrid want, and we've kind of already come to the conclusion that Spurs, in order to do this more pragmatic and constructive squad building with the areas we just mentioned, fullback, central midfield, then surely you see this as an opportunity to have your cake and eat it. So you can, if Eriksen's going to go there anyway, then you maybe take 20 million off of the overall price and try and throw in, someone like a Ceballos, or you kind of try and get Gareth Bale on extremely favourable terms.
Yeah, I think I kind of partially agree with both of you. I think Gareth Bale, he'd start for Tottenham. And he
on that right-hand side.
He'd
He's
be
been playing
fantastic.
that right-hand side for Real Madrid.
Then Pato is right. I think
it'd be a
there are
problem
more
defensively.
drastic areas of improvement needed in that Tottenham squad.
What helps keep Pochettino?
I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I mean, he might well be the sort of star name that Pochettino's looking for, but Pochettino...
Well, he's certainly a washing machine and not a dryer, isn't he?
But Pochettino is also going to demand a lot of out of him that Gareth Bale's body probably cannot do anymore. I don't, was it 12 injuries over the last few seasons? I think he's had 5 different injuries this season. I think his body might well shut down completely in a Pochettino press.
And even if you're only paying half his wages, over, say, a 3 or 4 year contract, which is probably what he'd demand off Spurs, and Real Madrid are not going to pay all of his wages for the whole of that, it's still going to work out as expensive as, say, if you got somebody like Tanguy Ndombele. And I just think if I was Spurs, I would be... the whole washing machine dryer thing was about getting the wrong player, not about getting the wrong quality of player. And I think that what they clearly need is a star central midfielder more than anything else.
There was an element of quality to it, though, wasn't it? Because he was saying that he was having to transform the player from X to Y, or bring them up to scratch, bring them up to speed, and he was having to, unearth these rough diamonds. I don't think, is he what Tottenham Hotspur, need the most? No, but I do think it'd be a worthwhile scenario. Like I wouldn't totally
definitely not. Don't totally
dismiss
write
it.
it. Yeah.
I mean, I think he's still 21 league goals was in it his final season at Tottenham. I think he comes back, yes, a more physically fragile player, but a much more well-rounded player. I think he could still have the same sort of impact. I don't know if you kind of try and sign him on a permanent basis if you're Tottenham. So, offering him a contract over 2 or 3 years. But if it gets to the closing stages of the summer and Zinedine Zidane is still desperate to part ways with him, PSG aren't interested, Juventus aren't interested, other clubs who can pay the a bulk of his wages, then do you try and take him on loan for a year? Sure, I think that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, going back to the Griezmann one as well, I think the Griezmann transfer stinks of the Coutinho transfer. Like when they bought Coutinho in, I think we all knew he was going to be a good player, but there was just no role for him in that side.
I don't know. I think a lot of people thought that it was like a genius move. Like I feel like there's been a lot of like.
I definitely remember sitting here and we were all going, I don't understand where he plays.
Griezmann?
Yeah, no, Coutinho.
No, I don't. I think maybe there was some of that, but I think there were also quite a lot of people who said this is perfect. What a brilliant transfer. And to be fair, Coutinho's a lot younger than Griezmann.
Yeah, that's true.
They bought Coutinho at 26 when he was one of the best players in the Premier League. They're buying Griezmann at 28 when he doesn't quite fit into their squad. You could at least see how they thought, okay, Iniesta's going to go. This is a guy who covers attacking mid and left wing. Whereas Griezmann covers striker and right wing, and in striker and right wing you've got two of the best players in the world. So it just doesn't seem sensible. When if they had all the other areas of their squad sorted, I'm fine with this move.
Okay.
If you're a super team where your squad's amazing, then it's fine to make this sort of move. When you've just had to hand Jordi Alba an absolutely ridiculous contract because you let him run down his current deal and you hadn't got a left back replacement lined up, then I think maybe you should think about other problems first.
True. I'll throw another name into the hat. I think that Perisic would be a poor signing for some of the teams that he's linked with. Heavily linked with Arsenal, of course. You boys heavily linked with Manchester United as well. I think he's over 30 now.
He is 30, yeah.
Least amount of goal contributions since he arrived. In Milan, I believe last season, about 11. And I'm hearing figures of like 30 to 40 million euros for him. And I just don't understand where Inter are seeing these numbers. I think Inter was seeing these numbers in a similar way that Chelsea was seeing these numbers for Willian last year, when people were desperate for wide talent. And Man United were interested, very interested. Maybe it was even 2 years ago now. But now at 30 plus, clearly in decline, a genuine old school winger as well.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's offering though the money that they're talking about.
But this is the.
Jose Mourinho last year
Inter are flogging him at that, aren't they?
Was prepared to offer 60 million, and I think this is like a ramification of that. Like his price has just slowly, incrementally come down from that kind of very heady fee that Jose was willing to pay.
Like
for
I
him.
presume you would not have
right.
that.
Like a year, 2 years ago, there was a weird phase of players, like these defensively minded wingers, or someone that could be seen to do a job maybe like a 3-4-3, going for like stupid money, like Willian as well. And these clubs are probably thinking we should have sold him this time last year. But yeah, who's? I don't think Arsenal are going to spend 40 million. If rumour has it, that would be a large proportion of your transfer budget.
Well, he's now
again, is it addressing the problems that you need to address?
Yeah, I've also
a wide player is addressing the problems Arsenal need to address, like one of their problems.
But Iwobi plays on the left-hand side, right? Is it more so the right you need to resolve?
Perisic can play on both sides, to be fair. He certainly has played on both sides for Croatia, but I don't know. Like a winger is fine, but Perisic is an odd one. Like he has underperformed his expected goals this season. Like you'd expect him to have around 17 based on his performances, and he's got 11.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he's not a dribbler at all. Like he never has been. Like the best dribble numbers of his career have been like 1.2 a game. He's now at like 0.8. And he fails more often than he succeeds, which when you think about coming to the Premier League is slightly troubling. And if you've got he's kind of like the champagne version of like Goodmanson at Burnley. Like he will try and get to the byline and whip in across. That is what he will try and do, and that's how Inter have played with him, and that's been very effective. But that makes no sense for Arsenal. It makes no sense for Man United. I just don't see it.
I also think that obviously it seems like when we're shooting this at the time, I don't think he's been officially confirmed, but Antonio Conte is going to be Inter Milan's manager next season, and I feel like he's the sort of player that Conte will want to keep. Like I feel like because he'll probably do a fair bit of defensive work for him, I think Conte will be pretty happy to keep him in the squad. He won't necessarily want the 35 million euros. He's been heavily linked, Conte is trying to sign Romelu Lukaku this morning anyway by a lot of the Belgian press, and Perisic is part of that deal. But I just think that Perisic is a player that Conte, he's the sort of player that he'll like to keep there. You know, how he got loads out of like Pedro.
He's a good squad player. Like, this is what I think though. I don't actually think that Arsenal ever offered 35 mil for him. I think
Italian press.
I don't think United's offers ever got as high as was rumoured. Like, I think the Inter kind of basically want it to be known that if somebody put in an offer of 30 to 35, they'd sell.
Yeah.
But if they don't get that offer, they're perfectly happy to keep him because he's worth more to them than 20 million euros.
Yeah, I would
but
agree.
if somebody offers 30 mil for a 30-year-old Perisic, you'd probably take it.
Another player I think we should probably discuss that's been rumoured over the last few weeks is Alexei Sanchez, proposed move to Juventus.
Yeah.
That's been doing the rounds quite heavily. Obviously, Manchester United desperate to clear him out this season. I think he's got 1 goal at Old Trafford, something like that. Played definitely less than 1,000 minutes, maybe even less than 500. I'm not too sure. Do you guys think Juventus would make a move for him?
I mean, you went back against Juventus, kind of pulling every last, drop of whatever talent, or obviously there's still talent there, but whatever gas he's got left in the tank, so to speak, out of him in Serie A. I mean, they will dominate games, won't they? There'll be a high amount of of chance creation. He's not going to be as relied upon as a creator maybe at Juventus, but does he fit the kind of profile of player that they're going for of late? Certainly, if you're adding Aaron Ramsey to your midfield, and there's also the question of what manager will step into the frame, what system they'll play, because Allegri kind of was moving away from his preferred 3-4-3, at various points throughout the season to chop and change in and around Ronaldo. So it's extremely difficult to picture Juventus making a move for him without a manager, without having an agreed upon system, and they've certainly got a lot of midfield personnel, not necessarily in the attacking mode, I guess. But listen, if someone like Bernardeschi's still in and out of the team, and he plays on that right hand side, he can play on the left as well, can't he? But I don't think they'd make him necessarily a top target. It would seem odd to me. I think his options are extremely limited, and it's sort of reminiscent of the Bale situation, isn't it? Juventus already have a lot of eggs in one basket with Cristiano Ronaldo, paying him £25 million a year.
Yeah.
Are they going to pick up Sanchez?
He's on £500,000 a week, rumoured, isn't it, at Manchester United? I think it's 350 plus bonuses.
Particularly with Dybala deciding upon his future now as well. It's not something I've really thought about until now. But
I think that's the case. If Paulo Dybala was to move on, then they maybe think about him as a last gasp saloon. But I would be extremely surprised if Juventus risk their financial situation to have a stab in the dark with Alexis Sanchez. It seems like they're bringing in Sergei Milinkovic-Savic as well. This week he's been heavily linked, which would be probably €100 million move if the reports are to be believed.
But that sounds like a player Juventus would move for, and they wouldn't mind paying a lot of money for, because he's kind of like a two-way midfielder, isn't he? Like for Lazio, he's kind of done it all. High chance creation, like decent shot numbers. Actually, I think his key passes around 1.5, but he's kind of played deep and attacking at various points, hasn't he?
But definitely dropped off this season. Like
5 goals, 3 assists.
Paying €100 million for a
But
guy
Lazio
who
have dropped off as a whole this season.
But like €100 million for a guy who isn't starting finals. Like when they're in the Coppa Italia final, you're expecting Sergei Milinkovic-Savic to be probably one of the first names on the team sheet.
But maybe they won't pay that much for him. Like maybe this does feel like a sort of situation where they think, okay, well, he's had a down season, maybe we can get him at a 20-30 mil discount, which would not be the first time they've done that.
Yeah, it wouldn't.
But I mean, just to go back to the Sanchez thing, I mean, it looks like Sarri's obviously strongly rumoured at the moment, and he does like to have a guy on one of the wings who can do a bit of everything. But he has that guy. He has Paulo Dybala. Paulo Dybala is better at everything than Alexis Sanchez, so it makes far more sense to me for them to keep him. Plus they've got, like you said, Bernardeschi, who I think is great. They've got Douglas Costa, who can back up. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, also I hated the Ronaldo move last summer, and I still don't particularly like it.
Any other names you want to throw into the mix here? I know that Manolas was sort of at the back of your mind at one stage, Pato.
I mean,
to Arsenal, of course.
He's 27. Like, he's quite a rash defender. Like, I mean, he is extremely physically gifted. He's very strong and very quick. it just doesn't feel like the right move. Like I think Arsenal should be looking to build a squad of players between kind of 20 and 24 who can grow together with the aim of like having a really good. So if you have players who are good enough to make top 4 now, and Arsenal were very close this season, you've got to imagine that in a couple of years' time, Torreira is going to be a lot better. Guendouzi will probably be a superstar at some point. Once you have all those guys kind of growing together, that's the sensible way to run that team. And I think Manolas feels like a weird departure from that.
Yeah, 36 million euro buyout.
That's a lot of money.
I mean, a lot of these players that we're discussing are quick fixes, aren't they? And you know, Borussia Dortmund in the last couple of days have made a bit of a mockery of paying, you know, X amount for a Perisic, you know, 40 when you can go and get Torgan Hazard for 24 and Julian Brandt for 22. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I'd be thinking more along those lines. If you're going to pay close to 40 for a Perisic, why not pay 60 for a Leon Bailey and get him out of Leverkusen? I mean, his stock has not, in the same way as Milinkovic-Savic, has come down slightly from last season because obviously the fees that Chelsea are reportedly sort of willing to put up were sort of in that 70 to 80 region. So you might get a little bit of a discount on him. Although Leverkusen did finish the season strongly, didn't they?
I think they'd be nervous about selling more players as well, because I've seen Kai Havertz really strongly linked to Bayern Munich today as well. So, like, I think you losing Julian Brandt, if they lose a Kai Havertz, they can't lose.
But they are this sort of club that kind of don't mind that rotation of talent. You know, if they get the required fees. So. I mean, it's not specifically just the Bundesliga. There's lots of value to be had. I mean, going back to Tengai and Ndombele, I mean, I've seen quotes this morning of around £84 million for him. So it kind of does swing both ways, doesn't it? And I just think, yeah, rather than pursue these 28, 29-year-olds who are on big money for big fees, the teams can be a bit more creative, especially from the Premier League, can't they?
Yeah, so do I. We also discussed the reverse of this question, by the way, the biggest bargain transfers this coming summer on the podcast, Sunday Vibes Extra Time. If you want to listen to that, you can click the link in the description below. And also, why not let us know in the comments below who you think is going to be the worst summer signing this year. Let us know. Moving on to quick fire questions then. The first one was sent in by Casual Waffles. He says, what do you think of Graham Potter's appointment at Brighton, and do you see them doing well next season?
I really like this. I think it's a really good appointment. Like, he seems like an intelligent, interested young coach who's open to new ideas, who is going to play an attractive style of football. I mean, he's been the best thing that happened to Swansea in quite a long time, and pretty much the only good thing that's happened to Swansea in a long time.
And they had massive budgetary restrictions, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think that with some of the players they brought in at Brighton, I think that it's really, really exciting. Like, the rumours today, actually, they were going to try and get Reece James on loan off Chelsea. And when you look around that squad, I think next season people will. The mainstream media will start to be like, hey, some of these players are pretty good, because they'll look really good under Potter. They'll say, oh, this Basuma's good, this Bernardo's good, Florian Andone's useful. So I think that Potter plus a winger or two and a right back, and they'll be in a really good situation.
I definitely think he suits their recruitment policy the best of any managerial candidate out there.
Yeah.
I was slightly worried when they sacked Chris Hughton, because I think Chris Hughton is like a steady pair of hands. And like,
I was not worried about that.
But my worry was that we're going to go out and get Mark Hughes or somebody of that sort of ilk. And to me, that is a step back, which would have been totally the sort of thing I could have imagined them doing.
They've been progressive, but I think Brighton always have in that sense, and you sort of saw the conflict last year, didn't you, between some of their signings and the sort of management and his style and his ethos, and it was starting to show that there was kind of different visions of the club and how it moved forward, which I think was certainly represented in their signings, like I said. But the only people that were complaining about the Hughton, I think, sacking were sort of neutrals. Brighton fans, I think, had come to the point where that they thought this should happen. I mean, he's done extremely well to take them from League One football, you know, to pitching themselves against the best teams in the world. But I think relegation was becoming more and more impending underneath him, wasn't it? And to only pip that Cardiff side by 2 points, given the personnel they have in that team and the sort of numbers that Duffy and Dunk have put up defensively over the course of the season, would suggest that he was kind of on borrowed time in terms of retaining his status as a Premier League manager.
Yeah, I feel like their analytics department's probably quite strong. Like, they seem to pick up a lot of sort of Moneyball-esque signings, don't they? Obviously, they were heavily linked with Daniel James before he agreed terms with Manchester United. I think that's probably a Graham Potter.
I think if I were United, I would probably then loan him if I signed him. I'd probably loan him to Brighton or Southampton.
Yeah, where
get
obviously he's worked under Potter before as well.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be an interesting move. But either way, I kind of agree. I mean, I'm interested by Graham Potter. Like, because so much has been written about him. Obviously, he was out at Ostersund's, wasn't he? Like, an English coach coaching abroad is a rarity, so that piqued our interest as well.
For a long time, we've championed like the young coaches coming through in the Bundesliga. We've maligned all the old boys getting, job after job, because it's them that's been blocking the progress of young English managers, hasn't it? Not so much, foreigners coming over from different shores. So yeah, like you, I'm all for it.
The next one was by Tomo KO. He says, you can sign one player from one relegated club in any league. Who'd you pick up? Now, Pato, a few of your suggestions on the podcast this week come into play here.
Yeah, I'd go Marcus Thuram.
You want to go Marcus?
Off Guingamp. Yeah, definitely. 9 goals and an assist this season. XG says that it would be way above that. Pretty much a goal or assist every other game for a side which scored 27 league goals and got relegated. And also, I mean, I think 3 players in Ligue 1 completed more dribbles than him. He's just massive as well. Like, he's got the physique of a centre-back, but he plays on the wing and he can play as a forward as well. Good shots inside the box numbers, 21 years old. Like, I just think that he's your perfect bargain winger for for a Champions League level club. He's a perfect bargain winger option.
I'll probably have a look at some of the Fulham boys. Maybe Ryan Sessegnon, although I think he probably cost more than the other options that are in that squad, because I still think they did some interesting transfer business last year, even though it failed spectacularly. Like, Ongisa would be a good pickup. I know we discussed him in the podcast.
Mitro, definitely.
Still young, Mitrovic, if you're a Southampton or somebody sort of middling in the Premier League that won a £20 million striker that's going to get you 10 goals a season, Mitrovic is going to do that. So probably either Mitrovic, Ongisa or Sessegnon. I just think Sessegnon might be a little bit too expensive. If you're having to pay sort of 40 to 50 for him, I think probably you go for an Ongisa or a Mitrovic out of that squad.
Serie A is still quite an interesting scenario, isn't it? Developing over there. Is it Empoli or Fiorentina that might get relegated? I think Fiorentina is still not likely. It's still feasible that they could go down. I think Empoli have won 3 on the bounce. So if La Viola were to go down, then you're looking at Chiesa, aren't you? You're looking at Giovanni Simeone. He's not had a great season, but has still got talent. So maybe one of those guys.
The last quickfire question before we move on to personal questions then was sent in by FJL. He says, were Real Betis right to sack Quique Setien?
I did a podcast on him halfway through the season when they were absolutely flying and people were loving his philosophy, and they just defeated Barcelona 4-3 at the new camp, with this expansive brand of football that he plays. And then, much like what happened to Sevilla, the wheels sort of came off in the second half of the season, and now you sense relief amongst the Betis fans that he's leaving. And I can't confess to be up to date on that, but I mean, do you guys know any more about it? Because it's quite a turnaround from where they were, at the halfway point.
I mean, I saw a lot of Betis fans on Reddit saying they were pretty chuffed he'd gone, which I found quite interesting. Maybe just because I've seen him bring in some really interesting names. I'm not sure Lo Celso would have been signed on a permanent had it not been for the first 6 months under Quique Setien. So for me, it's a bit of a risk. Like, I understand that Betis are trying to punch high, but they were really strong at the start of the season.
But this was kind of confirmation of something that had been brewing a while, right?
Yeah.
Like, we first started hearing about Setien maybe being let go in March time. So maybe it's just something behind the scenes, but I think that he'll get another job and he'll do quite well. But the back half of the season was bad. Like, whereas Sevilla, when the wheels came off for Sevilla, they weren't getting results, but they were still playing well.
Yeah.
And then they sacked Pablo Machín. Whereas with Setien, they haven't actually been good over the back half of the season. So it was kind of the first third of the campaign was very good. The second 2/3 was dreadful. So.
Okay, right. Let's move on to the final personal question then. This one was sent in by Sam_Goz, who says, what are the best and worst TV show finales you've watched?
Haven't we done this? Did we do this on
I don't think so.
Hot Takes?
We had them. Oh, I don't know. Maybe on Hot Takes.
Yeah, we did.
What did you boys say for Hot
So
Takes?
why don't you give us yours first?
Best, I think, was the end of Breaking Bad.
What?
I
was going to say the end of Breaking Bad is one of the worst.
Oh no, I love the end. I think
The last episode is so bad.
I've only watched one series
really
of Breaking
loved
Bad
it.
because everything was
How?
just ruined for me on Twitter.
Oh, right,
so
fair
now
enough.
I'm just
No, I really loved the
reluctant
end
to
of Breaking
invest the
Bad.
time.
I don't know.
The last episode of Game of Thrones wasn't the worst episode in the series, not by a long way.
I also thought that Peaky Blinders at the end of season 2 was one of the best finales ever.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Mr. Churchill will be contacting you shortly.
Worst. I'm trying to think worst. You boys got any other suggestions of worst or?
Sopranos was I mean, brilliant all the way through. It's certainly frustrating how it kind of just fades to black, but it's also great. I mean, worst. I generally stop watching TV series when they become really bad.
Yeah.
Just because I just get quite guarded about my time. So I stopped watching Dexter after 3 or 4 seasons. I stopped watching. What's the one with Damian Lewis? Homeland after 2 seasons, 3 seasons. It pains me not to finish things, but you just think I can see where this is going. Vikings, the wheels came off after 2 seasons. I thought this is brilliant, much better than expected, and then it was just like watching paint dry. But
the worst ending to a TV show, given that it had possibly 2.5 of the best seasons of TV history, is Lost. Lost categorically takes home the award for the worst ending to a show ever. They had no clue how to wrap it up. Literally, I
feel
just
like
thought,
they didn't anticipate how big it was going to be. Or the show just became like too big for them almost.
It was amazing in those first 2 or 3 seasons.
I'd say even like first 3 or 4.
And then I don't know what happened. Like I don't know whether they changed the writers or
they just had no idea. They had to start resolving stuff. Like before that, they just kind of were like they said they were like we could just keep adding mysteries. And then after a while, it's like you need to resolve these, and that was when they got in trouble.
Yeah, I mean that was a terrible ending. But
that was like the first kind of like binge-worthy TV.
Yeah, it was.
I remember just crushing episodes of that.
Yeah, same. When it was on like Channel 4. It used to be on Channel 4 pre-Sky, didn't it? But why don't you let us know what was your best and worst endings to a TV show ever? If you want to get involved in Sunday Vibes next week, submit your questions on Twitter, submit them on Reddit, or bash them in the comments below. Make sure you hit like, hit subscribe. What else we got coming up this weekend, gents? Anything fun?
Got a couple of podcasts, haven't we? I'm keen to listen to the Extra Time podcast. Wasn't on it this week. Doogie's stepping in. We've got Olivia's podcast. The Dodcast, aka The Game's Gone Mad. So I think we're on episode 4 or 5. And you're on it this week, aren't you, with the one and only Zach Jalab. So,
yes.
Yes, indeed.
Tune in. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Au revoir.